remember someone or something that you love or that you're really grateful for. Maybe you're grateful that you have a home, or you're grateful that, some disease process in your life has been healed, or you're grateful that you now have a grandchild or a new baby.
A new episode. Kind reminder that you can find us on Gnostic TV and old episodes on YouTube. My guest today is Evelyn Rysdyk. Evelyn, thank you for accepting a new invitation.
I am very grateful to be here. I enjoy your company, and we always have a good time.
Yes, and last time we talked, it was like more than a year ago in September 2023. So I think a lot have happened for both of us, and will be a new discussion with new discoveries on both ends.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
I think I will start by asking you something which is quite at forefront of our own development, and about the healing, the incomplete version of the feminine in all of us that can save our world. How is that? How do you perceive this concept?
Well, first of all, I completely agree. And that suppression of the sacred feminine has been, I think, connected very, very keenly to how we treat the earth. So for many millennia, when we were back there struggling to survive in the Ice Age and afterward, we believed that the earth herself was female. We made wonderful little statues of her as a fecund, fertile-looking grandmas. And when we later on in our development in the Levant came the three religions that seem to be dominant on the planet today, and they're very focused on being connected to a patriarch and diminishing the feminine as part of our experience of the divine. And I believe that perception is really part of how we have fallen so out of harmony with the earth, with nature, with each other as well, because there's this sense of you're either in the in group that believes in this deity, or you're the enemy. And that behavior not only separates us from one another as human beings, it separates us from the whole rest of the animal kingdom, of which we are a part, even though that makes some people a little upset when I say it. But, we are social primates. We are part of the natural world. We depend upon it, and we depend on the interconnections of all of it. And in order to have fertility in the broadest sense of the word, we need to have both the sacred masculine and the sacred feminine dancing together. So without that dance, I think we are diminished ourselves as well. That to me feels like part of the roots of the social illnesses of misogyny, of homophobia, of xenophobia. All of the othering that we do tends to come from that place of incompleteness based on that separation between the masculine and feminine. And so when we choose to open our gaze, to not look at that narrow tunnel that whatever spiritual tradition we have may have given us, and I'm not diminishing spiritual traditions in the least, but we're also thinking, feeling organisms that are not meant to be limited by dogma, but to be inspired by our connection to all that is, whatever name we give it. Whatever name we give all that is, which is that dance between the sacred masculine, the sacred feminine, that sort of eternal experience of possibility, that is what needs to inform us. And for that to happen, I think we need to undergo changes inside of ourselves so that we are having direct divinatory experiences, direct connection to spirit, that we feel in every bone in our body our connection to all the other creatures around us. And, you know, it always tickles me to recognize that as human beings, for instance, we are only 0.1% different from one another genetically. So it means every human being, no matter what they look like, how they worship, who they love, are cousins. And if we could recognize that part of our sacred experience and then how that is woven into everything else, I think that would support us to be the next level of possibility for human being.
Yes, and I think our feminine side has to come forward, and we have to let the women a little bit more in charge. And I'll give you an example. If you look at who is in charge right now at the political level, and I'm not going to call them leaders because they are not, they just go based on their ego and let's pay the payback mentality instead of thinking at the we the people and what's best for us, for the country, for Mother Nature. Because I mentioned several times, if we end all the wars tomorrow, there will be very little pollution because war is the worst polluter, and the armies involved in this process are the worst polluters on Earth. So that's one thing, that these guys at the top are mainly men, and with two and I'm very careful what I'm saying, two psychopathic women on the US side, which want war all the time. I think all the other women's at that position will want peace. And even, I'll give you another example. I watched recently on Netflix, King Woman. There is a movie that portrays the struggle of the African states during the trade, slaves trade in
Yeah.
the 50s and 60s, even 70s. And the king was relying on a tribe made of women, which were warriors. And the women sacrificed themselves, not having children, just a very tough regimen life to defend their kingdom, their people. They didn't want to conquer other tribes, but just to be able to defend their own. And that was, again, the women coming out with their warrior side to defend the men as well, and the children and everything else, the community at large. So that's why I think we need more women in these strategic positions in order for us to go back to a much more peaceful way of life.
Yeah, I think you're right. And the other piece that I like to remind people of is that men suffer under patriarchy in their own way. They are limited in their range of emotions. Men, at least in the United States, are basically allowed two feelings. They're allowed to be really happy or they're angry. They're not allowed to have that full suite of feeling insecure, feeling afraid, feeling confused. All of that is not socially acceptable in the culture, which means it's like not being able to be fully human to have all that suite of feeling. And in some, we have a private practice and we've worked with couples where that place where they can't really connect because they do not understand one another, because the suite of feelings that we're allowed to have in a female body just were not available for the man in the relationship. And that to me is criminal and painful, that people don't get to be their fullness. I think that is a source oftentimes of aggression, because there's a feeling that you have to fight for something in the world that is actually lacking inside of yourself. And, we see that across human culture. It's not in any one particular culture. It seems to be anywhere that patriarchal culture has taken over, it is a pain that is carried by the culture.
Yes, and I recently talked to extensively with another guest about the fact that men don't come to workshops, energy healing sessions. Is maybe the 20-80 percentile of between men and women, or 25-75. And we really address the men watching that interview to go and find help. And there is nothing shameful in accepting the fact that, yes, you need help and you need to discover yourself and better the relationship with yourself and the family.
Yeah. And in fact, men are less likely to go to the doctor. So it's often the case where whatever is going on in terms of disease or another process in the body that's gone off, they don't get to the doctor until it's far worse than it needs to be, because that feeling of vulnerability is also not allowed for a guy. And that, to me, again, it's such a burden on the entire culture, because if half the culture is not able to take care of themselves or understand what they feel, how can we as a group address whatever the big issues are in the world? We have to have some way to be much more able to communicate with one another and accept that we have needs and accept that we have vulnerability, and learn to lean on one another, not in a codependent way, but in a supportive way. Then we can face the enormous jobs that we have to do in order to bring our planet back to some sense of equilibrium and balance.
Yes, and to add to just what you said, that men will go or look for help when it's too late, then they will put even more strain on their relationship with the feminine side, because the feminine side, the woman, the wife, the partner in this particular case, has to take care of the man. So that relationship and that crack is getting deeper, and again, put a strain on everyone else around it.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah, Evelyn, I would like to go a little bit deeper into, I think you mentioned something about how our feelings can make us healing agents for those who are watching and want to understand better.
Well, our feelings actually affect the inside of our bodies, first of all. So if we're feeling fear, and fear has lots of faces, it wears lots of masks. It can show up as anger, it can show up as depression, it can show up as anxiety, it can show up as judgment, it can show up as blame, shame. All of those things are conglomerates that are part of fear. Anything that rocks our boat, basically, is fear. And when we are afraid, or in one of the other faces that fear has, some remarkable changes happen in our body that are not very good for us. So first of all, our upper brain goes offline. The very part of us that could solve whatever the problem is offline, because our biochemistry is telling us we're under threat. So it shuts down thinking, it shuts down digestion, and raises our heart rate, raises our rate of respiration, and we are in that fight, flight, or freeze condition. So we can't solve the problem that is in front of us, and we are doing some damage to our body, because that high rate of adrenaline and cortisol that you get in when you're in that state can continue for a long time unless you do repair, and I'll talk about that in a moment. The new information, or newer information, it's been around since the 90s now, which is a while ago, is that within each one of our cells, the DNA molecule, which has to be folded in a certain way in the cell. Misfolded proteins or misfolded molecules inside our body can actually be disease causing. Prion disease is a perfect example of that. So when we are stressed, the DNA molecule actually winds tighter onto itself. It's kind of like if you've ever twisted a piece of rope and it eventually sort of goes into that tight loop. It twists onto itself. Now, why we should even care about that is where the DNA crosses itself impacts how well the genes are functioning. So some get turned off, some get turned on. And they're meant to be in a particular conformation. So they consider the conformation or shape that the DNA molecule is in part of the epigenetic field. It affects how the genes express themselves. So if your DNA is responsible for cellular repair and replacement, creates new cells when necessary, and its job is to replicate itself exactly. It has to replicate itself as an exact copy. If we interfere with it by being in that fear state, we can cause incorrect reproduction of the DNA molecule where things are not quite right. But they're on the other side of that. So we know fear can get us into that cramp. And you feel like that when you're afraid or when you're angry. It's like your whole being goes. Rrr. On the other side of that are love, gratitude, appreciation. Those feelings, really feeling them, not just thinking of them, but feeling them, allows the DNA to relax. It allows the hormone bath in our body to change. So we are now producing DHEA, which is helping to bring our mood back. It's the hormone of well-being. Cortisol and adrenaline quiet down. Our upper brain goes back online, and our digestion comes back online. So we become a fully functional person again. And that switch is very easy to do. It's about, first of all, stopping and realizing that we're in that state. And we know, oh, I don't want to be in that state, even though, sometimes it feels really good to be justifiably angry. Don't wallow in it. You admit you're angry, and then time to do a healing on my body. So we take a couple of breaths, and what I do is I focus on the center of my chest, because usually your heart's beating like this when you're angry or afraid. So I breathe calmly like 10 times. Being born in New York, sometimes I have to breathe 15 times. And just settle myself down. Then remember someone or something that you love or that you're really grateful for. Maybe you're grateful that you have a home, or you're grateful that, some disease process in your life has been healed, or you're grateful that you now have a grandchild or a new baby. Whatever it is that can stimulate the feelings to come back in your body. It's not just an intellectual, slideshow. You want to narrow down one that gives you that feeling in your body where you feel that sensation of love coming back. You feel that sensation or gratitude coming back. And that turns that negative response off, and it fills your body with what is healing, restorative energy. Now, that's just what's happening inside you. But the other thing we know is our feelings are contagious. I remember as a kid, I was told about the idea of mob mentality. You'd watch something in the news and people were all freaking out and turning over cars and setting things on fire. And it's like, what do you mean mob mentality? And nobody could really explain how that worked until the research was done in the 90s. That our feelings are actually radiating out of our body. And it pours into the environment. It saturates us first, but then it pours into the environment. So we actually, through changing that inner environment, have the capacity to change everything around us as well. So it's fun if you have to be around crowds, like you're forced to go to the Apple store that's in the mall or whatever it might be. And those places are like, go in filled with gratitude or love, and you will feel the environment just calm right down. And you haven't done anything but start right here where you want to feel it. And because you're radiating out to the rest of the collective, since we're all so closely related, the rest of the collective picks it up around us. So you're creating this swath of healing energy as you're going to get the new dongle that you need for your computer. And that to me is miraculous, really, when you realize you can do that work, which is healing for yourself, first of all, but that it doesn't end at the end of your skin. You're actually bathing everything around you in that healing energy, including the plants and the trees and everything that's alive.
Yes,
So
it's a practice like anything else.
it is a practice. And what I love about it is it's not hard. You don't have to learn how to breathe a certain way or sit cross-legged or memorize a whole bunch of scripture. You're just working within this fabulous laboratory of the self, which is also operating like a shrine in some ways, when you're getting to that place that is helping your entire body to be in balance, and you give that gift naturally because you're connected to everything. Like how easy is that?
Yes, indeed.
So,
Yeah. Evelyn, I know you work a lot with the elementals. How do you find them these days? Are they much more active than in the past? Do you feel them differently?
well, I'm going to start with storms because I actually love to work with storms. Storms generally boil up out of nowhere, right? There are two air masses, one warm and moist, one cold and dry. They come together and a storm is born. And so I dialogue with storms. First of all, I thank them for bringing rain. And I think of them kind of like toddlers. If you've ever had a toddler where once they can move around, they are crashing into everything and they're getting into all kinds of mischief because they can move now. And storms are like that. They were just born. They have no idea how powerful they are. And so I feel like what I can do is work with them to understand their power and how they can give their gift without harm. And so I get lots of opportunities because we're having a lot more storms. So I do this in a shamanic journey. I actually talk to them and thank them, first of all, that we're grateful the way it stirs the atmosphere. It moves all that air around. You usually feel much better after a storm because you've got all that positive ions and good stuff going on. And I say, but there are parts of you that are way too powerful for us down here. Your winds are enough to completely tear the roofs off our houses, push down the trees. And I don't want you to stop blowing. I want you to lift your winds as high as you can over the land and then blow as hard as you want, way above the trees, way above the power lines, where you won't hurt anyone and you can feel the power that you have. And then I say, and if you carry lightning, please discharge it between your clouds, because when it comes down here, it hurts us. We lose trees, we lose power, and harm comes to beings down here on earth. So discharge your lightning from cloud to cloud, and because of where we're situated, the storms wind up going over the ocean last. I said, but when you get over the ocean, let your winds come down and ruffle the surface of the water. Let your lightning dance and skip like a stone on a pond, because there you will not hurt anyone. And I do this for probably 15, 20 minutes, sometimes half an hour, depending on what kind of storm we have. And first of all, it puts me in a feeling that I don't have to be afraid. All I have to do is advocate for life around me And then it's up to the storm to decide what it wants to do. But I can't tell you how different it feels in my body to be able to talk to that being in a journey and not be afraid of it, but see it as this kind of innocent that has all this power and doesn't know how to work with it. And it will only be here for a short time, and then it peters out, and then we wait for whatever the next storm is. But from that place inside of me, I'm not afraid. I'm working with a being that just does not understand its own strength. And I can help it to understand it and to that it not have to be harmful.
Dear friends, I am thrilled to be the organizer of the Holistic Wellness, Purifying the Body and Clearing the Mind conference. The conference addresses an essential need in today's fast-paced and often stressful world. With the increasing incidence of lifestyle-related health issues, mental stress, and environmental challenges, it has become clear that wellness must be approached as a whole. By attending, participants can learn about the synergy between physical health and mental clarity, discovering alternative ways to cleanse the body while cultivating inner peace and resilience. I encourage you to sign up and join us on this journey towards holistic well-being for ourselves and our communities. Use code HOLISTIC24 for 50% off. The Spanish version is also included when you sign up. Until next time, love and gratitude.
Yes. Beautiful approach. It's like a wild animal. And, Evelyn, there is a lot of talk about natural storms and man-made storms, which are being influenced and pushed over in specific directions. Do you feel this type of man-made phenomena differently than nature-based? And can you have the same influence on them?
What I notice is there are some storms that feel as though they are fed beyond the energy that they would normally have. But I treat them in the same way because it's not the storm's fault that they were meddled with.
Mm-hmm.
And, in the same way, I bless teachers because they sometimes have to work with children that come from terrible households. And they don't know how to regulate themselves, and they don't know how to not be mean to other kids. They just never learned how to be a civilized human being, right? And I feel that compassion for the storms that feel so so different than other storms. And I think it brings out more of my compassion for that being because it didn't ask to be born. It just happens. The two air masses don't get together and go, I know, we'll make a storm. It's just there, and now what? So that's probably a good way to approach people that are dysregulated, right? If we're able to hold our center and be with somebody who is dysregulated, and by changing ourselves, helping them also to settle down, that is a way to be in the world that is, again, it doesn't require a lot of bells and whistles to do it, but it's a way to approach everything. I am blessed to have been raised by somebody who learned how to hunt and fish from indigenous people. He had a guide up here in Maine, actually, when he was a young man, and taught him to hunt in what would be a good way in terms of the native approach to land and the creatures. And through my father, I learned how to be with animals of any kind. He said, first of all, learn how to walk like a deer. And I was like, what? But Dad, I have two legs. And he said, go three or four steps and then stop. And just look around with your eyes. And then take 3 or 4 more steps, but not in a straight line. Go a little cockeyed over to the side. And then stop and look around. And that's the same rhythm as animals use. They do a little scurry and they stop. Look for predators. What's cooking around me? Is there food? And then they take a few more steps. That plus being in that place of gratitude or love, wild animals have come up to me to say hello. And I know that sounds crazy, but it's true. Hawks have come close enough to see, like, who are you? Who are you? They fly right over my head. And that feeling that they're not afraid just feels so good to me. That I am moving through the world in such a way that they feel safe in my presence. That just because I'm a human being doesn't mean I have to be scary to the rest of the creatures that are in the world. And that to me is, again, part of this whole way of learning how to be in the world again in the way of our deep ancestors, when they had to depend on the animals, the birds, the weather, being cooperative in some way so that they could survive.
Yes. And going back for a second to the idea and the concept of storms, I feel like when there is a man-made one, the storm is being cursed to do something which the storm didn't agree with, but because his control she has no option, no other way out. And that's why when maybe she becomes angry and she tears everything apart because again she's coerced, and that's the only way to be released later on.
And even, even I want to say an animal that is angry. You come across dogs if you're walking and they're not friendly. People have them off their leash and they come charging up to you and they're like, "Rrrr." And I just go to that place where I am not a threat. And you don't have to be a threat either. And you can watch the body language of that animal stop. And the only reason it's that way is because it has not learned how to interact with human beings. Its owner, its caretaker, does not know how to interact with animals. And so the dog, who is missing having a pack around because they're canines, missing having some kind of leader in that pack that can help them to know what is okay and what is not okay, is left to its own devices. And it's not fair to the dog or to anybody else that the dog meets. So when we learn how to regulate ourselves first, and then from a place of caring, not try to control other things, but to share that feeling of being regulated, calm, peaceful, and as healthy as we can be, and wanting to share that. It's like a sort of open-handed kind of sharing. Other parts of nature respond, even ones that have been trained by human beings to be something other than they are. They respond because their biology responds. It's not a thought. Their biology is cooperating with it's okay. And when you've been in a place where it's high energy and not a good high energy, and you finally get out of that place and you go, oh boy, that's better. I think everything in nature does the same thing. There's this kinship that we have in the natural world that we forget about as human beings. We go through our human world, which tends to be kind of disconnected from the natural world as much as we possibly can. And that takes away some of our own capability, that disconnection. We forget that if we pay attention, we can know by looking at the clouds that it's going to rain in the afternoon. It's not that hard. That we can smell rain or snow on the breeze. That we can pay attention to the way the undersides of leaves show when there's a low pressure system coming in. I taught my niece, the leaves are showing their underwear. I think it's going to rain. And that that's available to us if we pay attention. If we get to that place we're in love with the world, in love with the fact that we're able to be alive in the world and to share what really is a miracle that's all around us, that it all functions as well as it does, even though we've done our best to try to screw that up. It's extraordinary to me. You know,
Yes.
maybe because I'm getting older also, it feels even more precious. It's an extraordinary thing. And
Yes.
that stepping back into it, you can take the smallest steps you need to, I think. But nature will begin to sort of just pull you in a little bit more. Like, oh, that's a really beautiful tree over there. Or, oh, I never heard the river quite like that before. You know, it's like nature wants us back. And so it's like, oh, you gave me something to look at there. Okay, all right. And
Yes.
it's just delicious.
It is. Thank you. And Evelyn, something which we didn't touch on our first in our first conversation is the fairy godmother aspect of your personality. How do you use that?
I was blessed to be raised by a whole bunch of elders. I had two sets of grandparents, a great grandmother, her siblings, and stories that went back to their grandmother's time. So I was around
Mm.
storytellers, basically. And I learned, 150 years worth of history from their stories from a very personal point of view. And I think stories are really important ways to learn things. Stories help us to find our way in to something where we go, oh, I think that's why we've always told stories as a species. It's why we have myths. It's why we have fairy tales. It's why we have all of those stories that were there to teach us how to be the right kind of person, how to be kind, what happens to those that aren't kind. All of that, I think, is part of the way we educated ourselves millennia ago. You can imagine our ancestors sitting around a fire where when you're around a fire outside, there's just this container of light, and beyond that, everything is very, very dark. And in that, imagine listening to stories. And you're listening to stories while a fire is flickering at the same rate that is akin to shamanic journey drumming. It's about 4.5, roughly 4 to 4.5 flickers a second, and the same as drumming. And that puts you into 4 brainwave states at the same time. So you are in alpha, you're in theta, you're in delta, and you're in gamma waves. Your brain is producing all of those. And so you're in this expanded perception. So the stories you were told were the equivalent of widescreen Panavision to your brain, because you were getting all of that information. And a good storyteller would have used senses, and maybe they'd change the sound of their voice and they'd gesticulate. And so you'd lean in and learn something that was probably useful in life as a hunter-gatherer. So because I was educated in storytelling by just listening to these elders, I found that first of all, I longed for them. As they started to die off, we lost storytellers. We lost the ones that could tell us stories of what it was like to ride on a horse-drawn trolley in New York City, or those, things that you wouldn't think about. And they would tell it from a personal point of view, and they would tell you what it smelled like and felt like, and all of that, so that you had such a visceral experience, it became your memory. And that, to me, is one of the greatest gifts we can give one another. Not just share something, but try to, in the telling, in the teaching, as it were, try to give them the sense that they have had that experience, because then it sticks. It sticks inside of us. And that is not something we're going to easily forget, because it's gone into all those categories of scent and what it looked like and what it felt like to ride in that wagon. And all those different things are now in their bodies. And to me, those stories still stick with me. I heard them. I'm now 69. I was little. I was in 2, 3, 4 years old while I was listening to them, but they stick. And you can still giggle over some of them that were funny when you recall them. And you can be amazed at the ones that you heard that were like, wow, I didn't know that even happened. So that's why I love to include stories when I teach.
Yeah, interesting, very interesting. Thank you for sharing. I know you dealt with a lot of indigenous shamans. So out of all of them, which one had the greatest impact on you? If you can share that, please.
Oh gosh. They've all had a great impact on me in different ways. So the first one I met was Puma Sangoma, Quispe Sangona. He's Peruvian, and I met him when he was 23. And he was teaching the mountain ways. He's a Quechua-speaking Indian. And he was teaching what he had been taught by his grandfather. And one of the things he shared was about how people that came to visit his village, and also he would help people get around and visit sacred sites, Cusco and whatnot. And they would say, "Oh, you shouldn't be doing computing. You stick to your old ways." And as he was telling this story, he had a hat on, and he tipped it down because he was crying. He said, "Why shouldn't we have that? It doesn't mean we have to give up what we know, but why shouldn't we be connected to everything?" And he was in this place of having to justify being a 20th century person, because it was the 20th century then, and being a part of a lineage of healers that went back for generations. He said, we need to have those things to stay connected, and he would have to tell well-meaning white people that, they don't have to be separate. We as a collective often want to put indigenous cultural practices kind of up on a pedestal and kind of shrink wrap them like they were in a museum. And that's not what spiritual practice is supposed to be. Spiritual practice has to grow with the times. It has to grow with the way things change. Yes, it has to stay in an agricultural community. It has to still be in the rhythm of planting and plowing and harvesting. Yes, of course. But that's part of the reality those people are in. And there is an expanded sense of that reality because they're also engaging in the 21st century. And our desire to kind of make these special little boxes to put indigenous people's practices in is another form of othering. Like you have to keep it that way so that we can get it pure. And it's like, no, What they're trying to teach us is how we can go back and learn how to work with our connection to the natural world, our way of being in the world, and how we're treating the others of our species and nature. That's what they're here to support us around. Not that we have to copy their practices, not that we have to tell them to keep it absolutely the same and don't ever change it. And so that first experience was very eye-opening to me. It felt absolutely right. And I felt that sense of how, because we are white-skinned, we are connected to all the other white-skinned people that have taken away the traditions of people like Puma and his family and his culture. And to remember that when we learn something, hold it as a gift, not that we hold on too tight and make it our own, but that this person from a different culture has shared their perspective, and we can look at that as a mirror of how we then can develop our own practices that do the same thing. And that is the greatest gift, I think, of the indigenous teachers I've worked with, is they show you how they do it in their culture, and using different languages and, different ideas about different concepts, but they show a way. But it's not for us to copy it. It's for us to look at and go, oh, how could I have those same feelings about where I live? How could I work with the animals that live where I live? What do I need to learn about the plants to find ones that can be medicine, that can be used for incense? How can I step back into my own deep history where I thought about the world the same way? The people who looked like me understood the world that way. That's the greatest gift of an indigenous teacher, as far as I'm concerned. If they haven't lost their culture, they are providing us the opportunity to see how it could be. Not specifically the way they do it, because that's their culture, but to reflect for us, like a mirror, where we have lost connection, where we have lost a sense of a sense of humility in the face of nature, because we've been trying to control it for a long time. So to put us back in that place of being humble, of being grateful, of being willing to work with the spirits of nature, with spirits of other people, to continue to do what I think is the shaman's role, which is to always advocate for balance and harmony. Not to have a specific goal in mind, but to advocate for some sense of balance and harmony, whether it be in an individual in terms of healing work, between two people that are in conflict, or between the entire tribe and the conflict that they may be in with the natural world. How do we advocate for that balance and harmony? And I think in some ways that's not just limited to the shaman's role. We can learn that for ourselves. What is needed here? How can I diffuse this situation? How can I raise up my own love and gratitude to the place where it's possible for these people to negotiate rather than be in conflict?
Yes, and I agree. I agree. And especially the fact that we should be grateful for the fact that they want to share and they don't want to keep it close to their chest. And then second, when you mentioned technology, it's also a grateful or gratitude component there, because now technology allows us to reach this knowledge wherever in the world. And the closest example to me is my discussion with Alan Torres, who pays for the Mamos in Northern Colombia to have internet. And they have to walk for 2 hours one way to get to that location, have a session with the world and those which are interested in their teachings, and then they will walk back for 2 hours to their village. So they are willing to share, no matter how hard it is for them to do it and access technology.
And it's I think necessary that we learn to communicate globally, and we have connections globally now, but to actually choose to work with one another over distance, because that's how we're weaving new threads. I have students now in, I think, every continent. So it means that people are connecting with others that they would not ever meet in the physical. But they are seeing how similar people are And it's getting closer and closer to remembering that, oh, well, that's because they're really family. They speak a different language, they have a different culture, they look differently than we do, but gosh, they're family. And the closer we move to that, I think the better chance we have to begin healing everything, us and the world around us. We
Yes.
have to reconnect.
Yes, you're right. Evelyn, I know that for a number of years, due to the pandemic, you stopped your drumming, shamanic journey drumming circle ceremonies. Have you resumed them?
Actually, we're doing them in a global way online. And it's actually really exciting because we do them in Zoom. And it is extraordinary when you see people connecting in the chat and, the people waving at one another on a meeting where they're connecting with people that they would never ever meet in person. And what they see is somebody that's interested in the same things that they are. They're seeing another human being. They're not seeing a stereotype. They're not seeing, oh, they live over there and they do that. They're seeing another person that's excited in the same way that they are about the journey that we just did. Or they're willing to hold space because you're moved so much and you're crying, when you share it, and everybody's right there, sending you hearts, and they're leaning in to support you. I mean, I think we're really, even though the pandemic was horrendous, it has turned something on that I don't think we can ever stop. And that is that feeling of, oh, I can touch all these people and be touched by them and learn so much. Mostly learning how much they're like us, no matter where they live. They're worried about being able to feed themselves and their children, having shelter, having clean water, having meaningful ways to contribute to the world. They're just like us, again, because we're family. In fact,
Yes.
we probably get together better with those people than the ones in our family of origin. But that is a joy. It's a joy. I mean, I get just so excited when you see all these eager faces and they can't wait to share their journeys, and they're typing them into the chat or they're raising their hand to share live. And everybody is benefiting. They go, oh, I had something like that happen too. And it's just, I can feel the weaving happening each time. And
That's wonderful. Yeah.
yeah, it's just exciting.
Yeah, thank you. I'm happy that you again resume these circles, and people are participating and they are having amazing experiences. And these experiences lead us into growing. And my next question for you is, what direction do you see yourself grow even more within your existing practice?
Well, with my personal practice, I hope to keep growing my connection so that when at some point in the future, when my expiration is up, my date on wherever it is on my body is up, I can flow into nature without any impediment. Just flow into the natural world as a spirit and not linger, not feel as though I haven't done my life, but just flow into nature in a good way. And in terms of my practice, we've started working with people who are eager to make an impact in where they live. So it's a mentorship. And we've got, again, people all over the place coming up with ways that they can share something with a larger group of people. And some people are creating a business in that way. There's a woman in Southern Africa that we work with who is, she's Afrikaans by ancestry. And she is in the process, she was an architect or is an architect. She's creating a place, a school for kids to teach them to be creative, support their creativity, as well as learning, what other things you have to learn at school. And she is building the building so that when they are through with it, it will erode down to nothing. It will just become part of the environment. And so she's engaging all these people in thinking about architecture in a completely different way. And she also is a glass artist. That's her medium for creativity. So she says, we'll teach the kids how to work with glass too. It can be done. You can do it carefully. They won't get hurt. And so there's this energy where she's creating where she lives. There's a woman that lives in Michigan who loves to fly fish and catch and release, just the being out there and making that little fly go back and forth and finally land in the water. And she works with, particularly with women who have had cancer and they've never fly fished, but she gets them out in a group and they learn how to fly fish and they're standing in the river and they're out in nature and healing happens. And so she's making that her primary way to be in the world. And there's several other examples. I could go on about that, but the idea that people are starting to be pulled by their heart to make a difference, whether it be in their local area or some global piece that they want to work on, they're letting their heart lead them. And the brain is happy to trot along and work on the details and keep the lists. But the heart is what's pulling them forward. And over the course of the time that we've been together, they went from that look of deer in the headlights, oh, I don't know if I could do a project, to here's what I'm doing this month. And they're revved up about it because they can feel their own energy rise, that this is important to me and I really want to share it. So I'm just loving working with people in this way because you can touch so many more souls than we can in person. And, those seeds go out all around.
Yes, it's wonderful. Evelyn, anything else you like to touch on that we didn't think up to this moment?
Well, I'm actually going to give you a link in the chat that you can share when you post this. And it's for a free guide to shamanic journeying and a recording of drumming. So let me get it to go. Come on now. There you go. It's all in bold, but you can copy that to use as a link.
Thank you.
And I've got the document is a PDF and I think it's 10 pages. Let me see. I printed it out so I could read it. Yes, it's 10 pages. So, and it's got all kinds of, scientific information as well as how to do the process. So, because we have to continue to expand our vision.
For sure. Thank you. I'll share that with the viewers. And these days, are you organizing any in-person workshops or tours to sacred sites?
We are waiting to spring to launch again. And right now it's a time of sort of allowing creativity to bubble up. I think of creativity as being tidal. Sometimes the tide is out and it's time to fill yourself up. And then when the tide comes back in, the new things happen. So that's where I'm in my process.
Nice. Very nice. Thank you. Evelyn, if you will have the power to give humanity a gift other than what you're offering right now, what would that be?
To tell every human being that listens or watches this podcast that you are way more than you think you are. You have been put in a box by school and the religion that you have been given by probably your family of origin. You've been put in a much smaller box than you deserve. You have extraordinary capabilities that fall outside of the box, and they are what can deliver you into your own fullness. So don't be afraid to look outside of where you've been, because there's a lot of good stuff out here.
Yes, indeed.
And lots of playmates.
Yes. As we are approaching the end of the interview, I usually ask if you have any other final thoughts.
My thoughts are, in fact, I want to do this as my wishes for all of you, is that you find that you're able to allow that small voice that doesn't always get listened to inside of yourself, that knows things, that has an awareness of you that maybe your enculturation didn't let you have, and that so wants to connect again. Connect to the roots of us, the roots of nature, the roots of the heavens, all of that that helps to make us feel as one group of people, one family, that helps us to remember that our family is connected to all the other families here on Earth, the plants, the trees, the animals, the birds, the little microorganisms in the soil. They're all family, and we're held inside this great terrarium, held in by the atmosphere and gravity on this one place that we are made to live on.
Yes, thank you very much for all your work and for the knowledge you spread around. Thank you. Much love.
And thank you for your sharing too.
Thank you.
Take care.
And to my viewers, thank you for watching. Share it, leave a comment. Visit us to spiritualinspired.ca. The audio version of all the episodes are on Buzzsprout and any other audio major platform. And until next time, love and gratitude.